Things that Donald Trump is doing are mainstream Republican American things. They are down-home American things that people support. Why does it take an outlandish man like this to accomplish it? It's because they have turned the press into a character assassination machine. And you either have to be perfect, which not many of, I mean, I may be, but not many of us is perfect, right? Or you have to be such a bad cat at this point that the stuff just rolls off you because we already know it. That they created this. You know, I was in the news business in the 80s. I was a news writer for a very big radio station in New York. I was there when this transition happened. It happened in the 80s. First, earlier on, there started to be this move to make news, which used to be a loss leader. You know, you put on the news and it was a public service that you did because you were an FCC controlled entity. So you had the news and it was just a public service. It wasn't supposed to make money. But over time, they started, as media branched out, they started saying, well, how do we make money? And local newsmen started to become handsome. They started to become funny. They started to joke with each other during the news. And this was written about a lot. People were writing about, you know, why are they joking? Is this going to pollute the news? Finally, in the 80s, what they did is they started to gut news departments. And I was there. I saw this happen. They cut out the reporters because reporters are expensive. They go off and do stuff, and it takes a long time to come up with a story, and you have to pay them all that time. They started to gut them. They came into this radio station where I worked. The new boss came in. And he told us, and we were known as the New York Times, which at that point was a compliment. When I called them a former newspaper, it used to be a good newspaper, we were known as the New York Times of the airways. Because I would come in and write a story about, say, the federal budget. My story would be 40 seconds long. In radio news, that's an eternity. And the new boss came in and said, no, we're not doing that anymore. Our stories are going to be 12 seconds long. And they're going to be about as many stories about condoms and AIDS and anal sex as you can get in there, because that's what people are talking about. That's what they care about. Well, this guy and I got into, the last time I've ever got into a nose-to-nose screaming match with anybody. I mean, it really, I do not have a big temper, and I certainly don't get in arguments when I think I'm in control, you know, when I think I'm going to win, but I was a nobody. I was a writer. It was a low-level position. I was arguing with the boss, and man, oh man, I made his life a living hell. Now, I can't guarantee that that's why he left, but a lot of people felt that I had chased him out. He quit the job pretty early. I then moved to England because I couldn't stand political correctness anymore. A couple of years, I come back and I ask about this guy, this boss whose life I had made so awful, and he's running one of the biggest networks in town. I even went and talked to him. We sort of had a friendly, you know, bland conversation. And I realized I had been a pebble on the beach and he had been the tide coming in. That was what the news was going to be. It was going to be about sex. It was going to be about what caught your attention. It was going to be that because they didn't have the news people anymore. They weren't spending the money on the news people to get the news, right? And so they were making money by the more audience we get, because we're talking about AIDS and we're talking about condoms and we're talking about sexual acts that had never been spoken about before. And our stories go by in 12 seconds. So we're not reporting on the budget. Nobody cares about the budget. Nobody cares what's in the federal budget. The legacy of that press is the press that now attacks politicians not on the basis of their ideas, but on the basis of their private actions. And it's an all-leftist press, which wasn't always true. The press used to be a working-class guy's way up. If you were a working-class guy, but you were smart and you could write, you might become a reporter, and the only thing you cared about was bringing down the powerful, left or right. You didn't care. But once it became a profession, once you went to journalism school, once you went to Columbia Journalism School, then the elite were reporting on the elite, and they wanted to get what they wanted to get. The press has become corrupt. It had happened since the 80s. I was there. I saw it happen, and it needs to reform itself. It can't be done by government because of the First Amendment. It shouldn't be done by government. But that's what we're seeing. So Donald Trump is a creation of the press. Donald Trump is not the enemy of the press. I always compare him to Godzilla. They set off the nuclear blast that created the monster that they are now trying to shoot at with their little puny rifles, and they can't touch him. His bad character protects my freedom. My freedom is what I want. I don't care if he paid off a Playboy model. I just don't.